dedicated to Daman and Takht-e-Suleiman. Time travel to 1808 to 1809. Excerpts from Mountstuart Elphinstone's book, An Account of the Kingdom of Kabul and its Dependencies. E-book created by Salahuddin Sikandar. The text, Daman in its most extended sense, comprehends all the country between the Salt Range, the Solimon Mountains, the Indus, and Sungur in Upper Sindh. I have already disposed of the part of it which lies to the north of the Koorum and Gombala, and now proceed to the remainder. This may be divided into three parts. The plain of the Indus, generally inhabited by Baloches, and called Mukulwand, the country of the Marwat, and the plains and low hills, about the roots of the mountains, which constitute Daman proper. Mukulwand extends along the Indus for about 120 miles. Its mean breadth is from 25 to 30 miles. It is a plain of hard, smooth clay, quite flat, bare of grass, but sprinkled with bushes about a foot high, and still more thinly scattered with separate bushes of tamarisk, and of summer inundates this country for a great extent. At the same time the mountain streams, swelled by the melted snow, pour down and cover all the flats with water. It is seldom very deep, but it seemed to lie long from the appearance of the ground, which is like that at the bottom of a drained pond. It is full of holes, and marked with channels by the water in all parts, and near the river these become considerable ravines. The banks of the river are covered with thick jungle of low tamarisk, sometimes mixed with long grass, and sometimes with thorny bushes, abounding in wild boars, hog deer, and all sorts of game. Round the villages are often large woods of dates, the only tall trees on the plain. Where there is cultivation it is rich, but by far the greater part of the plain is waste, owing to the thinness of the population and the badness of the government. The southern part of the plain has most jungle, the north is sandy. Camels of the same kind with those of India are bred here in great numbers. The principal town, Dera Ismail Khan, is the residence of the governor, a Balochi appointed by Muhammad Khan, the king's governor of this province, and Laya. The people are Utes and Baloches, dark in complexion and lean and meager in form. Their ordinary dress in summer is of dark-coloured cotton, and in winter greyish or striped great coats of coarse woolen cloth and quilted silk caps. They are perfectly submissive and obedient to the king and his representatives. The country of the Marwats is composed of sandy and arid plains, circled by ranges of hills. It depends entirely on rain for cultivation, and in many parts the inhabitants are even obliged to carry water for several miles to supply their families. Half the Marwats are fixed and employed in agriculture. The rest wander about with their herds of camels, living chiefly in temporary huts of branches of trees, with a wall of thorns and a roof of straw. Some few have black tents of the worst description. They are tall, fair men, and wear a pair of loose trousers, something thrown over their shoulders, and a handkerchief tied round their heads. Their country is about 35 miles square, stretching from Bunu to Mukulwand, and from near the foot of the Suleiman Mountains to the short range of hills which separates Laji from the Indans. It is, however, thinly peopled. In the narrow slip between the short range of hills just mentioned and the Indus live the small tribe of Kisore. Daman proper, which lies to the south of the Marwats and extends along the foot of the Solimani Mountains, there inhabited by the Viziris, Shiranis and Zmuris, is of equal length with Mukulwand, but of various breadth, from 8 or 10 miles to 30 and upwards. It is inhabited by the Daulat Kyle and Gundapurs, the Mankyle, Bauburs and Storiones, which tribes, with the exception of the Gandaporps, are included in the general name of Lahane. The Isorkals, Mervuts and Kisores also are comprehended under this denomination. Immediately to the south of the Merwats are the Gundapurs and Daulat Kyles, of which the former are most easterly. Their country is like Mukulmord, but better cultivated, particularly that of the Daulat Kyle. In ordinary years employs all the water of the Gomul in its cultivation. The Gundapurs have several large villages, of which the chief are Kulachi, Tawara, and Lone. Tak is the chief town of the Daulut Kyle. West of the Daulat Kyle are the Tutarays, Mayunis, Bitnis, and some other small tribes subject to the Daulat Kyle. Their country resembles that just described, but is more arid and worse cultivated, and towards the west it is hilly. The great road to Kabul runs past Tuk. It follows the course of the Gomul for a considerable distance, and is called from one pass in it, the Road of Gulaire. To the south of the Daulat Kyle are the Miyung Kyle, whose country is a little less flat than those I have been describing, and whose chief place is Deraubund. The chief road from Kandahar issues from the hills at Zirkune near Deraubund. It goes by Zawa, through a mountainous and difficult country. To the south of the Mount Kyle is the country of the Balbours, resembling that just described. The valley of Dehene opens on it from the range of Soliman, which pour out a stream which waters the cultivation. One road to Khorasan passes through this valley, but it is not so much frequented as that of Golaire. To the south, the Balbours have the country of the Sturéonais, part of which is in the plain of Daman, and like that of the Balbours, but rougher towards the south and far more dry and unfertile. The rest consists of the low range of grey sandstone, which runs parallel to the range of Soliman, with part of the mountains and unproductive country beyond it. The chief town of the Balbours is Chudwa, and that of the Sturéonais, Urmuk. The produce of all these countries is the same as that of India. Bajra, jawari, and wheat are the commonest grains. Many dromedaries are bred here, or at least by the tribes whose residence is partly in Daman. They are much darker in color than the common camel, have shorter and stronger limbs, and are far better calculated for work among hills. The grass of many parts of Daman is excellent and abundant, and attracts many of the pastoral tribes during the winter season. The climate is then cool and agreeable, but the heat of summer is extreme. The peculiarities common to the tribes of Daman will be best shown by comparing them with the other division of the eastern Afghans. They differ from the Berdaranis in appearance, being large bony men, often fair, and always wearing long hair and beards. They have less of the look of Indians than the others, though their summer dress is nearly the same as that of India. Instead of the long, wide shirt and cap of the Afghans, they wear a close dress of white cotton, tied across the breast, and reaching a little below the knee. Even in winter they wear turbans, but they are extremely large and loose, while those of the Indians are rolled close around their head in a regular shape that has little grace or elegance. At that season, they also wear brown and grey woolen greatcoats, ard postines. Their houses, food, and habits of life resemble those of the Berdaranis, but they live more on flesh, fruit, and other produce of their flocks, and they have less form than many of the others, playing at all games, and allowing their women to appear in public without the least restraint. Many of them are pastoral, and almost all are merchants or carriers. Part of every tribe goes up every spring to Khorasan. From this and other reasons, they have a greater mixture of the manners of that country than the Berdaranis, though they retain strong marks of their original connection with Hindustan. They are generally simple and honest, less litigious than the tribes with which I am comparing them, less bigoted and intolerant, and less addicted to every kind of vice and debauchery. Being still more remote from the seat of the royal authority, they are under little control from the government, and some of them seem, till within these 50 years, to have lived in as much anarchy as the Yusufzais. But this has been corrected in the greater part of them by the election of temporary magistrates, invested with sufficient powers to preserve the public peace, but prevented by the short duration of their office from applying it to any purpose inconsistent with the freedom of the tribe. This magistracy is, indeed, the feature in the tribes of Daman which most distinguishes them from the other Afghans. It prevails among all these tribes except two, and also in the neighboring mountain tribe of Shirani. It is also in use among the Gilgis of Kutawas and the Norsas, but among no other people of whom I have information. These magistrates are in some tribes elected by the mullahs, in others by the heads of families. They are chosen for their personal qualities, the number of their relations, and their general weight in the tribe, and are armed with power to maintain order and to punish the breach of it by fines, and in some tribes even by corporal punishment. They are selected from each kale in fixed proportions, which were at first designed to make up the number of 40, whence these officers are called Chelmashtis *, and they are under the authority of one chief, called the Mir of the Chelwashtis, who is elected in the same manner as the rest. The duty of the Mir of the Chelwashtis is to enforce the lawful orders of the Khan and to settle disputes by his own authority, and punish disorders even in the person of the Khan himself. The whole tribe is always ready to support him, to which they bind themselves by an oath. When the Chelwashtis are elected, it is an office of much power and considerable profit, as all the fines levied by the Chelwashtis are divided among themselves. The power of the Mir is not so absolute over the other Chelwashtis as to enable him to gratify his own revenge or pursue his own interest. At the expense of any of the members of the tribe, his office is generally annual, but sometimes he is only elected to preside over a march or to command in a war, and his power ends with the occasion which gave rise to it. It is sometimes allowed to expire, particularly in times of great tranquility, but the disorders which immediately commence again soon make the tribe regret it and determine them to restore it. This magistracy does not exist in tribes where the Khan has power enough to restrain turbulence of the people. It is evidently intended to remedy the bad effects of the weakness of the hereditary chiefs, and is the first step from a patriarchal government to a republic in its usual form. Demon also furnishes an example of the transition from a patriarchal government to a military despotism, but as this change is not so easy and natural as the other, and as it was partly affected by external causes, it will require to be explained at greater length. The Daulut-li Hail had formerly a hereditary Khan, who seems to have been held in great veneration by the tribe. By degrees, however, his authority grew weak, and the government fell first into the hands of the Muliks, and afterwards of the people. The Daulut Khail were now in the same state of anarchy that I have described among the Yusufzais. They had no Chelwashtis, and all hereditary authority was completely disregarded. They were, however, obliged to nominate some person to manage their affairs with the king's Sirdar, and although this person had little power, he had more than any other individual, and was called the Khan. He was chosen out of all the families of the tribe indiscriminately, but the choice sometimes fell on the descendants of the ancient Khans. This was the case about the beginning of the last generation, when Kutal Khan held the Oflis, and so much ingratiated himself with Mudad Khan, then Sirdar of Daman, that he formed the design of making himself the master of the tribe by means of that chief's assistance. He at first assiduously courted popularity and persuaded the Daulut Khail Hail to engage in the reduction of some little tribes in their neighborhood. He was entrusted with the command, and thus obtained a pretext for raising troops, which the contributions of the Daulut Khail and his exactions from the conquered tribes gave him the means of maintaining. By these means, he collected about 300 Baloches and Sindays, and proceeded to build a fort, after which he thought himself secure, assumed the right to levy a revenue from the public riots, and began to tyrannize over his own tribe. The tribe was at first struck with dismay, and submitted to his oppression, till at length he openly assumed the character of a sovereign, and ordered the people to pay their duty at his court every morning. 2 of the Muliks, whom he first proposed this homage, refusing to comply, Kutal told them that if they did not attend in the course of 2 mornings, their heads should be hung up over their own doors by the 3rd. The Muliks withdrew, and hastily assembling the tribe and the riots, pointed out Kutal's designs, and engaged them in a conspiracy against him, which was confirmed by solemn oaths. Next morning the whole assembled in arms, and besieged Kutal in his fort. After a siege of 3 days, in which many people were killed, the water in the fort was exhausted, and the garrison was obliged to evacuate it, and Kutal escaped on horseback, accompanied by some trusty attendants on foot. His flight was soon discovered, his enemies set off in all directions to pursue him, and 8 of them took the road by which Kutal was flying. His attendants were soon fatigued, and 1 man alone remained with him. Kutal, says one of my informants, at this time wore a robe which was given him by a dervish, and by the virtue of which he had obtained his present greatness. In the precipitation of his flight, this robe fell off. Immediately, his remaining attendant became lame, and lagged behind soon after his pursuers appeared. Kutal's courage had left him with his robe, and he had recourse to humble entreaties for mercy. Some of his pursuers answered, that they were sworn, and others that he had never shown mercy to them, and at last one of them ran him through with a spear. Kutal's family were all seized. Gul Khan, one of the principal conspirators, was put at the head of the tribe, and thus was baffled the first attempt at the subversion of the liberties of the Daulat Kyle. Sumur Khan, the eldest son of Kutal, was at this time only 16, but he was well educated and endowed with great natural capacity. By the assistance of his mother, he effected his escape from prison, and by a train of reasoning which could only have occurred to an Afghan, he was led to go straight to Zufar, the brother of Gul Khan, and throw himself on his protection. He reached this chief's house without discovery, and Zufar, in the true spirit of Afghan honor, immediately resolved to protect him, even at the risk of his brother's destruction. He accordingly fled with him to the Merwood country, and soon after began to intrigue at CAUBUL for assistance from the court. Their intrigues were soon successful, and Abdurrahman Khan was sent with 4,000 men to restore Survor to his father's office. In the meantime, Gul Khan had begun to be heartily tired of his magistracy. The tribe had turned into a turbulent democracy, over which he exercised a feeble and precarious, yet invidious authority. A sedition had broken out about the property left by Kutal, which Gul Khan wished to appropriate to himself. The Daulat Kyle began to murmur at his government, and one of them had drawn his sword on him and asked if he thought they had killed Kutal to make him their master. He was therefore equally terrified at the prospect of Surwar's success and at the continuance of the democracy, and listened with pleasure to an overture which Surwar made to him, and which seemed to present the only safe retreat from his perilous situation. Accordingly, when Surwar approached, Gul Khan's management, supported by the terror of the royal arms, disposed the Daulat Kyle to submit, and Surwar taking a solemn oath to forget past injuries, they consented to receive him as their chief. This appearance of forgiveness was kept up till all the leading men had been got up together, when 18 of them were seized and put to death. Gul Khan was spared, but on a subsequent quarrel, Surwar put him also to death. His government was now established, all those that could oppose him had been made away with, and nobody in the tribe had the courage to rebel. He continued to strengthen himself, and to put the murderers of Laius' father to death, as they fell into his hands, till 12 years ago, when all his enemies were extirpated, and his power was at its height. Since then he has governed with great justice and moderation. His steady and impartial administration is popular among the ryots, but odious to the Daulat Lahale, whose independence it restrains. Surwar now maintains about 500 soldiers in his own pay. All the customs and the revenue derived from the riots are his, but he takes nothing from the Daulat Kyles. Like Qasim Khan of Dir, he cannot rest without reducing the free tribes around under his dominion. His chief designs have been against the Gundapurs Paws, who are his nearest neighbors. They are little less numerous than the Daulat Kyle with all their riots, but Surwar can always impede their operations by bribing some of their mullahs, and even when they engage heartily in a war, there is a great difference between villagers under the temporary authority of a Chelvashti and the troops of an established government like Surwar Khan's. The general jealousy of Surwar's designs, however, induces the Mountstuart Baubas, usually the bitter enemies of the Gundapurs, to unite with them in their struggles against that ambitious chief, and these means have hitherto been sufficient to keep his power within due bounds. The Daulat Kyle, with all their riots and conquered tribes, amount to 8,000 families. The Gundapurs have a hereditary Khan and hereditary Muliks, but their power is very slight, and the tribe leads a lawless life, plundering strangers, stealing from the flocks of the wandering tribes which come into their neighborhood, and continually quarreling among themselves. Their weapons on these occasions are sticks of wild olive, so that murders are rare, but when one happens, it entails a deadly feud on the family, as is usual among the Afghans. Their public affairs are conducted by an assembly of all the heads of families in the tribe, those who cannot attend, sending some of their family to represent them. When they have a war with Surwar, all disputes are laid aside. A Chelvashti is named who sends a drummer round each village to proclaim the time and place where the tribe is to assemble in arms, and any man that fails to attend is fined. The Gundapurs are great merchants. 50 or 60 go every year to Khorasan, and 4 times as many to India. But this circumstance has little effect in civilizing them, and they have a degree of rudeness and brutality in their appearance and manners which I never saw in any other tribe. The Miyunkal are about 3,000 families, of which number a fourth is composed of Bakhtiaris. Of this tribe, which is said to have come originally from the banks of the Tigris, and which is very numerous in the southwest of Persia, there are about 700 or 800 families at Derobund, and about 500 at Murga. Those at Derobund are completely incorporated with the Miyunkal. They have a share in their councils, gains and losses, and are almost identified with the tribe. The others are connected with them, and, though not united with the Miyunkal, they send succors to that tribe in its wars in Damaun. The Khorn of the Miyunkal has little power. He has an eighth of all customs collected at Derobund, but no share in the collections from the riots. Public affairs are managed by a number of mulliks, who take care to consult the interest and disposition of their Kales, but do not refer to them on every question that arises. The Khan has lately been endeavoring to imitate Sowor, but with little success. He too entertained some Baloches, built a fort, and began to encroach on his tribe, but he was opposed by the mulliks. His power was circumscribed, and, by the last accounts, some farther attempt of his led the tribe to besiege him in his fort, and he may perhaps, ere now, have shared the fate of Kutol. One half of the Mayonchai moves every spring to Khorasan. No entire Kyle moves, but half of each. The mulliks do not often move, but send a member of their family to command the moving division of the Kale. They have also Chelwashtis of their own, who have 110 authority among the settled people, except in time of war, when the Chelwashtis of both descriptions have a concurrent jurisdiction. The moving Miyunkales, when in Damaun, encamp in the neighborhood Borhood of Derobund, and send the camels to feed on the shrubby plain of Muckelwald, pay a small sum on each camel to Muhammad Khan for this privilege. Their method of distributing the emoluments and duties of the tribe among its members deserves to be noticed, as the same is probably observed by all the tribes of Damaun. The tribe is divided into 4 parts, one of which is Bakhtiaris and 3 Mayonul Dial. The customs, after deducting the Khan's share, are divided into 4 parts, and each division of the tribe gets a share, which is afterwards distributed among the subdivisions, but as the number of persons in each of these is not the same, the division is unequal. The revenue is assessed in the same manner, and 8 Chelwashtis are taken from each division. The Balboors are a civilized tribe, much addicted to merchandise, and on the whole, the richest and most flourishing of the tribes of Damaun. Their Khan has considerable power, and they are reckoned among the quietest and most honest of the Afghan tribes. Their late chief was raised by Timur Shah to the high office of Amin-ul-Mulk, and enjoyed a large share of the confidence of that monarch. It is rare to see a man of any tribe but the Doraunese elevated to such a station. The Balboors of the plain are about 4,000 families. A large division of the Balboors lives in Sehra, beyond the mountains of Soliman. It is contiguous to the country of the Shironese, with whom those Balbars are much connected, and whom they resemble in their manners and customs. The Sturionese were, till lately, all pastoral. Their country, indeed, afforded little temptation to agriculture. They conquered it not long ago from the Baloches of Damaun, and used to make it their winter station, and move their camps and flocks in summer to the lands of the Musa Kyle Caukers. These migrations were rendered inconvenient or impracticable by a quarrel which the Sturioiles had about 25 years ago with a clan of Caukers, through whose lands they were obliged to pass. Half the tribe on this sowed its flocks and betook itself to tillage. The other half endeavored to keep up its ancient custom, but was soon compelled to imitate the rest, and after some disputes between the new settlers and the old, the whole tribe became agricultural, except 2 clans, which still adhere to a pastoral Ifa, and move their little camps in spring to Spusta, on the southwestern skirts of Solomon's throne. Many of the Storiones, however, are still merchants and carriers, a life approaching to that of a wandering shepherd. Their carriage is mostly on bullocks and asses. Their numbers are about 4,000 families. Their government agrees exactly with the model of an Afghan aristocracy. The Qazi, however, is so important an office that complaints are made to him directly in the absence of the Khan. The Qazi is appointed by the Khan and the mullah of each village by the mushir. The son of the last incumbent is preferred if he is fit for the employment. The condition of the riots is nearly the same in all these tribes. They are generally Juts and Baloches, with some Hindus. They have no land, and they are under the person on whose estate they live, in the same manner as the fakirs of the Yusufziyas. In Daman, however, they cannot pass from one man to another without their master's consent, which is generally obtained by a present, either from the riot or from the person who wishes to receive him. They can, however, quit the tribe to which they belong whenever they please. Surwar alone endeavors to prevent his riots from leaving him. The whole of Daman is subject to the king, but his authority is loosely exercised, and he seems quite indifferent to everything but his revenue. The tribes are bound to furnish him with a body of horse, for which he generally takes a commutation in money. He also levies the jizya, or tax, on Hindus throughout Daman. The tribes of Daman seem attached to the king so long as he does not interfere with them, but they look with horror on the prospect of being brought under his government and changing their present independence for submission to a master. An attempt was once made by Muhammad Khan to reduce the Munkile, and he took many of their villages and forced their corn to fly. The fugitive Khan went to his inveterate enemies, the Gundapurs, and although the tribes have many wars among themselves and are all jealous of Surwar, the whole, including the Mervuts and Esaukail, rose on this occasion as one man, made Surwar their chief, and did not desist till they had compelled Muhammad Khan to abandon his designs. There are still to be found in Daman some families of the tribes of Surai and Lodai, to the first of which belonged the dynasty of Ghor. At one time the most powerful in Asia, the second for a long time gave kings to Hindustan. Besides the tribes I have mentioned, all Daman and Mukulvaud are filled in winter with camps of Solimaunkailes, Karotais, Narsas, and other wandering tribes who come there to avoid the rigor of their native climates. Those who have camels move into Mukulmord, but those with sheep remain in Daman.
Famina miladi kadil mayin dikrma kurbansham Sabaya davma kurbansham Sawai gile tabasingai davma kurbansham Sabaya davma kurbansham Sawai gile tabasingai davma kurbansham Tabaya Dawama Kurban Sham. Saudagari da yau burbali har sabna kurban sham tabaya dawma kurban sham sawai gale ta basingai dawma kurban sham tabaya dawma kurban sham sawai gale ta basingai